back to Reactivity TV. I'm Amy Albero, and I'm a licensed therapist.
I am Chris. I'm not a licensed therapist, but as America's reality TV honesty broker, I have a couple things that I have to clarify from last week, right? Really important things. I think it's important for me to come out and admit some failings and some faults that I had with last week's episode.
Okay, right off the top, go for it.
Yeah, all right. Maybe I should just play the clips from last week. Yeah. So let's just start with I can't on one hand come out and say, I felt like I knew every one of these names, knew every one of these guys, and then proceed to conflate Dan and David. And we had some great people in our comment section last week saying, Chris, the horse guy and the guy who Joan remembered all of the information about and the guy who went home, like you're conflating Dan and David. And so to Dan and to David, I apologize. You are two distinctly different human beings. And so I felt like it was a little ironic, I guess is the word, that in the same episode, I would talk about how much I knew every guy and then turn around and conflate two. But it was night one. And I want to remind everybody, it was night one.
Well, I mean, it also is ironic because you kicked off last week's episode talking about how perfect you are and how perfect your takes are and your insights.
I don't feel like any of that has changed. Well, you want to talk about a more fun clarification?
Sure.
So, okay. So I had said last week that I had an opportunity to see a practice video of Jen doing her cha-cha routine, and I described it as awful. Now, I had a chance. I actually went and had a chance, and I watched Joey's Dancing with the Stars performance and Jen's Dancing with the Star performance and Danny Amendola's. And many of you are asking, Chris, that's a real weird third choice. It's not. I was born and raised in Massachusetts, let's not forget. And the only loyalty I maintain to that state are the New England Patriots, to which he was one of the trash slot receivers during the second era of the dynasty. So I had a chance to watch their routines, and I have some comments. Jen's routine was not good, but it was not as awful. She actually made a lot of progress between the practice video I saw and her final routine. That being said, I actually was like, I've never watched Dancing with the Stars. I do not know how it's scored, if the crowd plays a factor. But for those that aren't dancers, there's a bit of a Title IX type-esque problem here, right? Where it's not really inherently fair to put men and women in a competition like this together, because depending on, when you're dancing together, depending on the environment and the atmosphere you're in, will dictate kind of which one has the more challenging and difficult job. So the thing to always remember is that the woman is the picture, the man is the picture frame. No one's looking at the picture frame. If it's an ugly picture frame, then it can distract from the photo. But if it's just a perfectly acceptable picture frame, people are looking at the picture. And the same is true with dancing, right? And so when you are in a social dance setting, casual dance setting, the man has a much more difficult and challenging job because he's navigating the floor. He doesn't have a set routine. He's trying to figure out what the order of the steps are going to be and not run into walls and people and stuff like that. But in a showcase style routine like Dancing with the Stars, the woman has the significantly more challenging job because, ultimately the man has a set routine. He's not thinking about steps. The woman can back lead him. He doesn't have to navigate the floor and not run into other people. And it's really the type of routine where it's all about the grandiose flash. And that requires much more on the female, on the follower. And so, yes, Joey's routine was stronger. He was just objectively better than Jen. It wasn't as stark a difference as it probably appeared. Right. She was not great. But of the three, actually, Danny Amendola's was the worst routine by a mile. He was doing tango, and tango is significantly harder than the cha-cha for a beginner dancer, right? I mean, his knees were not together. There was a lot of problems with his tango form. But that was all his follower. That was all his pro back leading him through that entire thing. So I want to apologize to Jen. I was very critical of her practice video, but her actual routine was better than the practice video. Not good, but like if this was a competition and we assume that she's in like the bronze 1-2 category, I mean, that was a solid 6. I don't know what the judges rated her, but like that was a solid 6
thereabouts. Yeah. Listen, I mean, this is not a Dancing with the Stars podcast. We just happen to be two people who ballroom dance, so we are a little bit more invested with this crossover. But I think your points are really good. That the pros in the case of Joey and Danny, they had Jenna and Whitney respectively. Like they're obviously incredible dancers, and the men don't have to necessarily do a whole lot for them to still perform and make it look good. And it is so much harder on Jen in this case, because she is carrying the performance in a lot of ways. There's only but so much that her partner Pasha can really do. But you do see, like, Joey seems a lot more comfortable performing. Jen just, feels insecure, maybe not quite as comfortable being a performer. That's my whole thing with dancing. Like, I'm too self-conscious. And I was seeing that with Jen in her performance, but I thought that she did a good job. Cha-Cha's really tough. Anyway, we did not watch week 2 of Dancing with the Stars. So if you are interested on our amateur ballroom opinions, I'm sure, it wouldn't matter if you're interested or not. You're still going to get them from Chris. So stay tuned for more. But we're getting way, way off track here. After actually Chris and I had a conversation around like, let's not go down any rabbit holes tonight. Let's just try to, talk about what happened. But here we are. We are back this week talking about Joan's season of The Golden Bachelorette, episode 2. And we have a lot to talk about. Oh my gosh. Spoiler for me is I freaking love this show and the men that are on it. So we're definitely going to get into that, into the dates that they had, into the connections that were made, into the roses that were given. But before we do, please be sure to hit that like button at the bottom of this video. And if you're here, we would love for you to be a subscriber. We are on to our next goal of getting 5,000 subscribers. We are, I don't know how to do the math, but we've got
a ways to go.
We've got quite a ways to go. So if you are here and you are watching our content, hitting that subscribe button does go a really long way. We really appreciate all of you who have subscribed. Thank you so much. But if you haven't yet, do us a little tap and subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, and please also hit that bell icon so that you're alerted anytime we post new content to the channel.
All right, let's do this.
Let's do some opening thoughts. So you started off saying that you love this show. I agree with you entirely. I actually think I might be a Golden Bachelorette fan. This might be my favorite format of this show. But lead me off. But episode 2, we got a little taste of the guys last episode. Where are you at?
Okay, so the in full transparency, and Chris, you know this because I had said it to you about an hour before the show aired, I was not feeling this tonight. It's been a very long day. A lot's going on. I completely forgot that it's Wednesday and that the show is on. So like I was not in the mind to not only record a podcast about it, but just even simply to watch it. And let me tell you that within the first few minutes, my mood completely shifted, and this is just a completely wholesome, beautiful show. I love it. These men are so endearing. I just want to hug them all. I'm obsessed with the show. And I had said to you at one point while we were watching kind of like virtually in a watch party that I think I might like the cast of these men more than I like the cast of the women on The Golden Bachelor. Like the casting did a home run with this group of guys. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that. It's been a very long week, and I too was like, this is about the last thing I want to be doing is watching a show, and then because of the schedule, having to podcast till midnight, only to start editing. But wholesome is the right word. As I was watching the show, I got the same type of feelings that I used to get when I would watch Boy Meets World. Remember that show?
Sure.
What an awesome, wholesome show from our childhood. Like that was like the last era of like wholesome TV with positive messaging, right? And it's been pretty much all downhill since then. And it's like, that's sort of the feeling I got. And I'm like, I'm digging this because that's what I miss. Why do I not watch a lot of TV is because there's not that type of content out there. So I'm shocked that a Disney subsidiary would put out this type of content at this point. But I'm happy to see it. Like, maybe they're turning the corner. Maybe we're gonna maybe they realize that all this Euphoria nonsense is not great and tiresome, and we need some wholesome in our life.
Excuse me, I'm still very much waiting on bated breath for season 3 of Euphoria to drop, and I don't know if we're ever going to get it, so please don't even put that out in the universe.
I never saw it. I just saw you watching it, and I knew enough to know, not for me. But so I do have a couple critical pieces to open up with, right? I think that Joan is really having some authenticity problems, right? In her conversations with all of these men, she's doing that thing where she's responding too quickly, too often, being too engaged, too affirming. She's not settling back and letting them tell the story. It feels like she's constantly feeling like she has to have some perfect response, and the responses are not coming across as genuine and authentic in my mind. Again, I don't think this is because she's not a genuine and authentic person. I just think maybe she's really nervous or really anxious, or both, right? And that's, I think, my big criticism, because I loved a lot of things about this episode. I loved a lot of dates. We'll get to those in a few minutes. I loved the guys. I loved a lot of the conversations, but the thing that's pulling me out and saying, wow, that was a wonderful moment, that was a wonderful connection, is that I think she is holding herself back from having truly great connections, because she's, I don't know if performative is the right word, but it looks like she's just trying so hard to do the correct thing and be the correct Bachelorette. And it's kind of getting in the way for me of the authenticity. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree to an extent. That was definitely the case as I was watching the beginning of the episode. And then about halfway through, she seemed to warm up quite a bit. But I do think, when we were watching it, I had said, like, when she was on the date with Chuck, like, gosh, she seems really anxious. And I think, as we've talked about, it is a lot of pressure to carry the show, to be the lead of a show. And for her to be the first Golden Bachelorette, it's really different to be a Golden Bachelorette than it is to be a Golden Bachelor. There's different expectations for what your role is and how you're supposed to act and all of that stuff. And so it does feel like there is a bit of like Joan's own perfectionism at play that is robbing the authenticity. And that's what happens in our lives as well, that when we try to be perfect, we lose ourselves in that. And we can see when we have these pockets of Joan feeling more comfortable and being just more at ease and being a little bit more playful with the guys, like that's her. Like, we're getting to meet her at that point when her guard's down. But it makes sense that especially at the beginning of the season, we're going to see her defenses up a little bit more, because she is performing. I mean, again, she is the lead in a cast.
Yeah, I mean, what I find interesting is when you watch her in her, like, in the moment face to camera work, she actually comes across as far more genuine and authentic. It almost feels like, and this is where how you can tell it's a stark difference when she's in the room alone with the producers and the camera. It almost feels like her guard's down a little bit more. It's when she's, one-on-one or in the group settings, she's in front of the guys. That's where it feels like you start to see this need for perfectionism crop up. All right, let's transition over to good date, bad date.
Yes, I'm so excited. There were some, spoiler, my opinions, good dates this episode. I mean, what Joan was previewing in her season about having some interesting dates, she was right. I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm mostly positive this week. Starting us off with the group prom date. So I actually thought that this was, I was concerned when they brought up how they were going to execute on this, right? But the fact that they had the crowd, they had the music going, everyone sort of got some dancing in, everyone got a little bit of one-on-one time in sort of the side room. Everyone got a little snack and whatever. We got Mark spiking the punch bowl. Like, I loved how they executed this, because I think it could have really gone sideways really quickly. But all the guys had an opportunity to have some one-on-one time. All the guys had a chance to get silly and, play around and get loosened up. And all of them got to dance with Joan and themselves. So I don't know how this was anything other than like a solid, I'd say solid A-, right?
I thought this was a home run of a date. I know I'm using a different analogy here rather than a grade, but exactly what you said. Like there were such like easy opportunities to get one-on-one time, whether that was in a dance or in the photo booth or like pulling her to the side. There were also opportunities for the men to like do things together. They're not just kind of standing around. You also get to see their personalities a little bit. You get to be silly. You get to have fun. And it's a good way to kind of get those vulnerability, those maybe not as obvious vulnerability moments that this show is. I can't wait to get to that later. This show is doing such a good job at showing us what vulnerability actually looks like. And I thought that this date was great for that. And it was fun to watch. Some of these dates are kind of boring. And so I thought this was an A across the board.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right. So Disneyland Day. How you feeling about Disneyland?
I think this was a good date. This wouldn't be a date that I would enjoy, but I think that it could be a good date. You're literally forced in proximity together, whether it's on rides or things like that. And there's different ways that you can be together on these rides, whether it's just something that's a little bit more casual and you can have conversations walking around, times where you might be a little scared and, get some like physical affection going on, in a way that's like, not inappropriate. So I think there's lots of good setups here. And so I think, again, overall, it's a good date. It's an experience that you have together. I think it's great. Another good date. I'm shocked we've never seen this before in quite this way.
Yeah. I thought it was a selectively good date. I think you need to, if I have just met somebody for the first time, don't know that much about their personality, this is not the date I'm pulling out of my back pocket. But if I have confidence that they're a fun-loving person and, then I think that this can be a really good date for the reasons you outlined. You get it's a one-on-one date, but even if it was a group date, or even if you were there with a group of friends or a bigger social circle, there's so many opportunities to manifest alone time, one-on-one time.
Right.
And which makes it, a great opportunity for trying to connect with somebody. And in some cases, like you're locked in, like we're on a ride, we're on this ride for the next 3 to 5 minutes. If I've got a criticism is that it can be a somewhat of a choppy date, right? Whereas,
there's a lot of start and stop kind of thing.
A lot of start and stop. And I said this last season, I forget on what date it was about. But that can be struggle for some people. I think it was one of the market dates, like Jeremy's market date or something like that, where if you have a lot of start and stopping, some people just can't hang in those. They get distracted, or they have a hard time keeping stories on track or keeping stories concise to a point where they can tell stories and tell about their lives in 3 to 5 minute increments. But, all that aside, I still think it's a good date.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there was these two dates, the prom and Disneyland, had a lot of nostalgia to them, because while I've never been on a date to Disneyland, I've never been to Disneyland. I've had so many experiences where I've gone on a date or like done a group hang with someone I was like interested in or dating at a carnival or at a fair. That was like such a big part of my like adolescence and like even, a young adulthood, in kind of like going there, meeting with a boyfriend or like meeting with my friends and so, again, a group of people. It felt really nostalgic, along with, thinking about prom, senior prom.
Yeah. And so then we round out the dates with the annual talent show. We've seen this in pretty much every season. My opinion is it's not a good date, but it probably is a reasonable metric by which somebody could assess whether or not somebody's a dud. I don't think you can necessarily tell that somebody is your perfect match through a date like this, but I do think that you can weed some people out pretty quickly based on how they respond. And so it's not a date that I think is viable in the real world in most cases. But in a lot of ways, I think the real world comp is when you go on when we go on vacation and there are like the theme nights and there's a night, they have the show and stuff like that. And they have like the audience participation nights at the show. Like that's sort of the comp. But again, if you're at that stage of your relationship, like you don't need that information. You should have already gotten that information elsewhere.
Oh gosh, I would be eliminated because I hate that shit. As you know, I run away. I do not want to engage. But I think I might have said this when we did Golden Bachelor last year. But one of the experiences that really endeared me to you. I mean, we were already like in a serious relationship at the time, but was such a endearing moment was when we were on vacation with your family and you got up on stage and you rapped Ice Ice Baby. And it just was kind of like a side of you that I don't think I had seen yet, which I now know very well. Like that is such a big part of who your personality and who you were, but I never really got to see you in that light at that point. There just wasn't a mechanism for me to know you in that way. And
you're saying I was too serious when we first started dating, right?
I mean, think about what our lives were like when we started dating. There wasn't a lot of time to have fun. We were both in a really stressful life and career situations at the time. We weren't really having a lot of fun outside of, the dates that we were having together, which were nothing like this because we were both poor and just trying to figure out how we were going to eat.
There were a lot of ramen noodles on the couch watching crappy movies. We did a lot of Redbox back then, for those of you old enough to remember Redbox.
Yeah.
That was a classic early date of ours. Yeah.
But the
key to that story, though, for people to know is that Ice Ice Baby was not even part of the official catalog. The karaoke catalog, he actually kept it under wraps because too many people requested it and he was sick of it. But when he met me, he said, I'll pull it out for you specifically. I'll pull it out for you. And I gotta say, I crushed it.
You did. And it was to your, it's a good way to learn more about someone, and again, what kind of person, or part of their personality, what kind of characteristics someone has. So it doesn't necessarily bring you closer or move you away, in the way that you can gain intimacy in these other dates, but it can round out an assessment of someone for sure.
Do you know, to this day, 15, 16 years later, I can still sing the entire song?
Wow. I mean, hey, maybe that's part of what happens when we meet our new goal is that you can, live rap Ice Ice Baby. I don't know.
Do you know what's maybe slightly more embarrassing?
Oh, no. What?
All these years later, I can also still sing all the lyrics by heart of his Ninja Turtle rap song from the original Ninja Turtles 2 movie.
Oh gosh, I didn't realize you were such a Vanilla Ice fan.
We might need 10,000 subscribers for for the Ninja Turtle rap.
That's really funny. Learn something new every day about you.
Well, stick around long enough. I'm like an onion, right? When you peel back, enough layers, it's. I mean, you're going to cry usually while doing it, but there's always another layer. All right, so shall we get into the actual events of the episode?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so we start off with the group date. It's basically at this point there are 18 men, so we get 8 on the first group date, which is the prom date. We then have the one-on-one with Chalk, and then we have 9 men go to the talent show. So the 8 men are Gary, Bob, Jonathan, Charles L, Mark, Jordan, Guy, and Keith, which is a pretty strong, we like Charles L. Jonathan was one of my preview picks. Keith got the first date rose, right?
First impression rose.
First impression rose. Yeah. And Mark is Mark. Feels like a real strong first group, right? So yeah, it's this, I think there's a couple things worth noting here. Jonathan, he's never been to a prom. This was his first prom. I thought that was really interesting dynamic. He told some stories that I thought demonstrated some really good vulnerability without it becoming he could have gone down so many different paths, the victimhood path. He could have gone down the woe is me path. He could have gone down, so many different angles he played it. But I thought the way he presented it and, kind of the direction it took him and how it led him to the decisions later on in life that it led him to, I thought was really well articulated and demonstrated like just good character, right? And good judgment in a lot of ways. And I thought that was probably the most noteworthy. I shouldn't say that. There were a lot of noteworthy things that were really interesting this date, but that was the thing that really stuck out to me. And I admit I might be biased because he is one of my preview pick guys.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jonathan is kind of like a star. I mean, he's so handsome. He's, again, very charming and sweet, seems genuine, is charismatic. And yeah, he does tell us this story and this experience. And one thing that I like just really empathized with a lot with what he was sharing is that like this is a moment that, despite it being, I think he said 43 years ago, it is still something that he carries around with him. And that's true for all of us, right? Like, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to claim like victim status or that it's a deep trauma, but it can still affect us or sit with us in some way.
Other really, I think, noteworthy stars, Charles L., or otherwise known as Wise Charles. I mean, I was so sad. So at some point in time, he's sitting on the bench by himself, a little bit awkward, like just, the classic scene from the high school, kind of movie, but then he gets his one-on-one time, and really that was a nice, touching conversation. I feel like he really maximized his one-on-one time. Do I think he can win this show? No, I do not. But you know what? Every time he's on the screen, I'm intrigued, and I think that matters, and so I hope he goes far, and I hope we see more of him. But I again, he talked about his wife passing away. I think he said 6 years ago. How a few years ago, his daughters really had to kind of kick him in the butt and get him back out there. Yeah, I'm a big fan. We got to see him dance a little bit, and Wise Charles dances exactly like what you'd expect him to dance like. I mean, and it was entertaining to watch.
Yes, gosh, what a sweet, precious kind of experience watching Charles L. like on the screen. And it was like sad, but not in a pity way, but just like you felt his sorrow and you felt his sadness in the way that he was talking about what his experiences, what his life has been like since the passing of his wife. And we learned that he and his wife were one another's only dating experience and only loves that they've ever had. So that certainly amplifies the loss, as well as the fact that she was healthy and she had a brain aneurysm and died suddenly. And we had talked about that a bit last week around kind of the difference of experiencing or navigating through grief when something is sudden versus when you have time. And in other parts of this episode, we hear about conversations that some of these men were able to have with their wives or significant others, and that Joan was able to have with her husband around like, no, I want you to be happy and I want you to move on. Well, Charles never had that. And so maybe it did take him longer in comparison to be able to give himself the permission to explore happiness or explore what that could be with someone else. But I did want to also highlight that his loss was very sudden. And what I also loved hearing was he had said that today is the first day since my wife died, or my first happy day since my wife died. And that, I mean, is magic. Like, that's healing. And I think that also speaks to just relationships and experiences and how healing they can be. Does that take away his grief? No. But does it give him hope? Yes, absolutely. And that's where the healing happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this entire interaction is only spoiled again by Joan not really engaging the way I'd like to see her engage, right? And again, we already talked about it a bunch, so I don't want to, waste a lot of time on it. But like, I just wish that she could settle in and, listen, and do a little less trying to affirm, a little less trying to, be responsive in the moment, and just settle back and really listen. Because it feels like to me when I watch her in this interaction and in the interacting with Jonathan that she's maybe not actually hearing the entire thing, because it feels like she's so focused on, on actually responding and what's the proper response, and it's less on hearing and then just giving a more natural response.
Yes, yeah, I think that's true. We, as I said, we do see her evolve a little bit throughout the episode as she grows more comfortable with these men, or maybe just in her role. But yeah, I mean, do I wish that Charles got a little bit more from her? Yes, but I'm not ready to be critical of her just yet. We'll see how this evolves.
Okay, so let me ask you then: did you get the sense that perhaps Joan was doing a touch trauma trading in this episode?
What are you thinking of when you say that?
Well, I think there were a couple of situations, right? But it felt like every single time a man told a story, she always came back with a personal story. And sometimes they were I think it was with Jordan later on, the story was clearly very relatable, and so I could understand how she get there. In other situations, it felt like the relatability was a bit strained, right? And I was wondering, on your perspective, is this just me looking for something to criticize, or was there actual sort of trauma trading going on?
I didn't see it as starkly. I mean, it felt like she was relating to these men, but that was my big criticism of Jen in her season, was that the men would share something and that she would always bring it back to herself, and they felt so disproportionate in terms of what they were sharing. Whereas I mean, many of them are talking about deaths of spouses, and so it feels like, okay, we have this commonality. We've had similar conversations with our loved ones. Like, I think in the way that we had talked about with Gary, when he was the Golden Bachelor, like, his wife will be in the room. And I think that's very clear for Joan, that her husband is very much here. And that's true for these men too. I think even Kim says it later on in the episode. He says, we both, like, she understands that I am still in love with my wife, and I understand that she is still in love with her husband, and that we can still continue to find love. Like, there's still room for love. And so I think that there is an element of what we're talking about specifically here in terms of their previous relationships and the passing of their loved ones that matters.
Okay, so one other question related to sort of the whole episode, but in the context of this first date, we keep saying that these men are demonstrating true vulnerability, right? And last season with Jen, we saw a whole lot of like fake vulnerability. But how does one, if they're on a date with somebody, how do they identify the difference? Like, I feel like I know it when I see it, but let's assume that I'm not in my early 40s and I'm in my early 20s, and maybe I don't have the life experience. Well, like, what are the markers that you would identify?
What is it that you say a lot? Show me, don't tell me.
Yes.
It's not, and we, again, the perfect example of what vulnerability is what Dan did later on in this episode in the talent show. Even Christopher had pointed it out as that's vulnerability. And what was it about Dan, what he did that was so vulnerable? He owned his tremors. He kind of leaned into it. He was a little self-deprecating, and he put himself out there in a kind of a goofy way. And so vulnerability is also about kind of losing your ego a bit and letting your guard down, just being yourself. Joan is not being very vulnerable at the beginning of this episode because she is so guarded. She is, again, there's this element of being performative. I'm not saying that she's faking it. I'm saying that she has her guard up. She has a mask on. She's doing a job. She's not being herself here. And that's not very vulnerable. And so I think it is when you can like truly meet someone, you know when someone is not being themselves. You just know it. You can feel it. And so to your point, like, you know it when you see it. I think there's a lot to that. You can tell when someone is being honest, and being authentic are two of the most vulnerable things that we can be. Letting your guard down is akin to being vulnerable. That's why joy is actually the most vulnerable emotion, because our guard is completely down and we're completely in the moment. Sleeping is the most vulnerable thing that we can do because we're not conscious at all. And, you know, someone can come in and disrupt us. And so I think it's truly about that, about how much your guard can be down.
Well, I am ready to move on to shock state. Unless, is there anything else? I mean,
well,
I guess,
of course, 1.5 things that are notable. One of the big criticisms we've had of some of these group dates in the past have been like, you win like the best something, like the best farmer, or the best this, or the best that, but that doesn't win you the group date, Rose. So it kind of feels silly.
What was the point?
Yeah. In this case, on both group dates, the winner, so to speak, actually got something good.
Yeah.
In this case, when Jonathan was crowned the prom king, he was also awarded the group date rose, which I thought was meaningful. And this was a really poignant moment for Jonathan to get the prom king on his first ever prom, and again, kind of repairing that hole in his heart from 43 years prior when his date canceled on him at the last minute.
Yeah, I thought this was well. I thought it could have gone to several people, but I thought it was well deserved.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, weren't you the prom queen?
I was the homecoming queen.
Homecoming queen. That's right. Yes, that's right. Well, you were also prom queen once when the dance studio. We had a prom party at the dance studio in the early days of us dancing. Yep.
I had fun exploring a different side of myself at that prom. My actual high school proms, I wore like big poofy dresses, one that was purple, one that was white with flowers on it, very princess like. And the prom for the dance studio, I wore like a black kind of edgy dress, these like really cool heels with like spikes and rhinestones on them.
Studs. I
was feeling like alternative, and I liked it. If we ever have a Halloween party again, I would love to do a prom theme.
Okay. Yeah. We used to do Halloween parties, big giant Halloween parties. And then, we stopped doing them because it just got too much money, effort, and people had kids and got married and couldn't come anymore. And so our parties of 50, 60 people dropped to like 20, and it just wasn't worth the effort to do it for 20. But hey, if we get enough subscribers and you guys want to have a Halloween party, we throw an awesome Halloween party. We really do. We
are not inviting random people, no offense, subscribers to our home. Also,
we'll rent out a hall.
Love to see that. I just want to do another check here. We've been recording for 1 hour and 7 minutes, 43 seconds. How many fucking rabbit holes and tangents have we gone down? I think we cursed ourselves by saying, like, let's not do that, because we still have 2 more dates to talk about in a rose ceremony.
I know. I'm actively looking at my battery being like, I'm going to have to actually plug this thing in. So, all right, let's get on track, shall we? Second date. Oh, wait. No. Last comment I have on the group date. Guys breakdancing. Loved it. Right. It was right up there with Jack's Cannonballs. That's it. That's all I got to say about that. And let us move on to Chalk's one-on-one date at Disneyland.
Yes.
This one, I don't have a ton to say about this one. I think it was a good date. I think Chalk took the opportunities that he had when he had them. What I think is interesting is that looking at Joan and the little you learn about Joan up front, you do not get the sense that she's an adventurous person looking to do a lot of like these types of things. But the more we get to know her, the more she's like really leans into like, no, I just want to throw bags, i.e. play cornhole. I want to go and have barbecues, and I want to like go to Disneyland and go fishing and stuff. Yeah. These things, qualities that you would just not expect, right? Very much a don't judge a book by its cover type of situation, where the more we learn about her, the more we realize like, oh, there's like a much more of kind of a rough and tumble, adventurous sort of side to her. Whereas what we oftentimes see is much more of the very pristine, put together, like Fairfield County mom kind of style thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good call. I mean, the question I literally laughed out loud to, which was like, you could tell a lot about a person by this question, was when Chalk asked her, "Where do you vacation?" And that's such a person.
That's such a Fairfield County thing.
It's just something with a question that only someone with a particular level of wealth would ask in that way. And so I was like, okay, Chalk, noted. I see you. But I thought that was funny and notable. But yeah, I mean, he talked about vacationing in the Bahamas or Bermuda. I forget what she said. And
Bahamas,
and she talked about kind of going fishing and whatnot. But we do hear her say she's looking for someone to have fun with. That seemed to be the through line of all of these dates, and bringing Chalk to Disneyland. That was like what she was looking for. Like, I think we connect on a lot of stuff, but could he be fun? And so like, what better place to kind of measure that than a Disneyland? One thing that Chalk does say a lot through the episode is that he refers to himself as the rock of his family. We don't really learn much about where that comes from or why, but that seems to be really important to his background and to his story. And that also makes being vulnerable much more difficult. That makes again, having fun is vulnerable. And he has talked about how like one thing that he actively works on is letting his guard down and being in the moment. Like that's an active practice for him. And being on this date was a way that he could do that. And when you are again, the rock, your guard always has to be up. You're always trying to anticipate, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's really hard to be in the moment in that case. And so this was a pretty big deal that he could just be there and have fun and embrace his younger self, his child self, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I thought he leaned into it fairly well. I really particularly like the R2-D2 scene, right? I do think that he was a little stiff and wooden at times. But the effort was there. You could see that it wasn't really a natural state for him, but he was really trying to lean in and really trying to show that side of himself. And so I think he gets points for trying and he gets points for the effort. I think that he's got legs to go pretty far in this competition.
Agreed.
He seems like a good guy, genuine guy. It does feel like, Joan and he have, a pretty reasonable connection. Again, same criticism I have for Joan where it just, it felt like when they're in the moment walking around doing stuff, when she's not sitting down next to him or across from him, looking him in the eye.
Like these staged moments. Yeah.
Yeah. Like these moments are her tough parts. But when she's like walking around and just sort of like, fiddling around with the controls in the Dumbo ride, like I feel like that's where we start to see the guard come down. And you've said that you think that the guard kind of came down throughout the episode. I actually feel like it wasn't so much that it came down throughout the episode. It felt like we saw it come down in moments where she wasn't effectively facing off with the person.
Like more candid.
Exactly. And that's where I think she really shines. I thought this date was probably the best date for her in terms of how she looked, just because it was kind of the most candid at times. And most of the others had much more face-off moments. And I think that she's still struggling there to find herself and be authentic and genuine in those moments.
Sure.
But yeah, I thought it was a good date. I thought Chalk, again, demonstrated good vulnerability, talked about, real meaningful topics. And he expressed kind of decently well why he's on the journey that he's on, where he's come from, where he wants to be going. and ultimately how she would fit into his life. And like, that's really important, especially on a limited time budget, right? And he did so in a way that wasn't super cringy and didn't feel like trauma dumps. I just thought he executed fairly well, notwithstanding at times his a bit stiff woodness.
Yeah. No, saying that he was stiff and wooden definitely came through. And it is confusing, right? Because we do see things on a very edited TV show. We're only seeing things through one angle. But Chalk says that he feels like there is chemistry here. They seem to have the same values, the same morals. Joan says a lot. I feel like we have a lot in common. So there's probably something happening that we just like aren't seeing through the screen. It might be both of them that are just like a little too stiff for that to be felt through the screen. But Chalk is someone that has another really tragic loss, and he shares that. And something that you have said a couple of times is that insert name here, like, doesn't really feel like a trauma dump. And the thing that I have been reflecting a lot on, and Dan again refers to this later in the episode, is that is the difference between, people in their 60s, 70s and people in their 20s in life, right? Like for Jen to talk about her toxic ex as being like really traumatic tells you what kind of life experience she has, tells you about the perspective that she's gained. Whereas these men, right, like they have lived life, and for them, it's not trauma. This is just life, and shit happens in life. And this is just a part of life. I'm not a victim. This is just life. And I think that is why we are experiencing them their shares in a different way, despite the fact that they are dramatically more quote unquote tragic than what we've heard, not even, not to single out Jen, but just the Bachelorette franchise, that age group in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's something, fundamentally different, once you've lived 50, 60 years and you've actually experienced, true, loss and heartbreak, mm-hmm. Suddenly that ex who didn't treat you the way you wanted him to treat, kind of that entire situation pales, and how that made you feel pales in comparison to losing a spouse, losing a child, losing a parent. Like these are all, I mean, they're different orders of magnitude of, emotional, heightened emotional states or sensitivities that you're going to go through. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I'm digging watching the older generation. I think Golden Bachelorette is far more interesting on a lot of levels than mm-hmm. the 20 somethings. Right. Yeah. And I don't think it's particularly close.
I don't either. I'm so entertained, and it does make me think. I was talking with a therapist colleague earlier this week, and she's got a daughter that's young, about 10, and she was telling me about a book that she's reading, and it's really about kind of what's going wrong parenting wise in this generation. It's something I know you've heard me talk about for years, which is that we aren't really allowing for that we aren't really allowing for opportunities for kids to grow resiliency, that we are sort of bubble wrapping them as much as we can. We're making them feel so comfortable. And we need, in order to survive, we need to be able to tolerate discomfort. We need to be able to build the muscle to regulate our emotions, to withstand stress. Stress is a part of life. And not only are these people, they've been parented in a different generation, they've grown up in a different generation, but they are a living example of like life keeps happening, and you have only one choice, which is to keep going. And the more that life throws at you, the more practice you get with dealing with life. And I appreciate that perspective so much, because on the other side of things, we don't really get to see that as much.
Yeah. Basically, you're advocating for send your kids outside and let them scrape their knees a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I scraped my knees a lot as a kid.
Look how you turned out.
Yeah. I'm well adjusted and fine. I married a therapist.
Yeah.
That doesn't say anything about me. All right. Shall we get into the final date?
Yes. Golden
Okay.
Talent Showcase.
Well, I guess it is worth noting that Chalk did get the date rose, obviously. So no shocker here. There was a date rose given out on all the dates. So yes, the second group date of the day, the talent show, 9 guys. The men were Dan, Michael, Jack, Charles K, otherwise known as CK, Kim, Greg, Pascal, your boy, Christopher, and Gil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I thought it was very unkind of them to not read the names off and just said, the rest of you go. And so I had to figure out what the 9 guys were. I was like, that was mean-spirited, guys.
I know
have limited prep time today.
As wonderful as the producers and the editing is going, one complaint I have is they are just not showing us their chyrons enough. Like, it's episode 2, guys. Like, we don't know them yet. This date, just to give us a little bit of Golden Bachelor lore here, this was the date that Joan kind of had her breakout moment where she, recited the poem that she wrote for Gary. They had some one-on-one time.
She got the date rose?
Yes, she got the date rose. And so this is like how we really got to know Joan on Gary's season. And for her, she said that this was the moment that showed her that she was ready for love. And so poignant moment, poignant date for Joan and her experience as a cast member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, we've all seen the the talent show a bunch of times. We know kind of how it goes. There were, I think, a couple comedic moments. And then there were a couple of moments that were a little bit more heart wrenching. But I mean, the one that I really had questions about was Kim here. So I thought this was a bit of a bad look for Kim, whereas he started to look a little insecure, maybe a touch petty. I like Kim. You know how I feel about military guys, big fan. Was feeling a little maybe petty, and
just he's got an ego, this guy. I mean, he's a military guy. He's a captain. I mean,
he's practicing the singing, and then the song, not good. The singing was not good. I think they were homemade lyrics. They weren't very good.
You hate an original song.
I mean, I'm not, me, I'm not a really music oriented individual. So I just, how did Kim land for you? Because he was really the one where they were hyping it up, and this had a little bit of a Sydney
feel. Did you feel like they were hyping it up?
I felt like he got. I feel like he got the majority of this felt a little Sydney. I've got this great cheer, and this cheer is going to be awesome. And the whole entry into the whole segment was Sydney telling us how awesome her cheer is, and then she just freaking bombs.
Oh God, it was so cringy.
Now, it was so cringy. Now, Kim didn't bomb per se. I think obviously it's a different generation and everything like that. So I don't think anybody would let him bomb because there was an authenticity to what he was attempting to do that didn't hold. But one of the problems I have is he writes an original song in preparation for going on the show. Well, but you didn't know how you were going to feel, which means in some ways this felt a little bit like you're sort of showing your hand a little bit. Like you're writing a song about, how much you liked. Now, in fairness, it was more of a song about, are we the right fit? So, okay, give you a little bit, but it just feels weird to me. Writing a song about a woman you haven't ever met as you're going on to a competition show.
That's what did it for me. As you said, we've seen this talent show thing over and over again. You know who else has seen it? Kim. And some of these other guys who kind of did their research. They came in, they were prepared. They had already been practicing some talents. Kim wrote this song or whatever. And I asked you while we were watching, do you think there's a little bit of a morality issue here where, I don't know if they necessarily cheated, but it didn't feel totally authentic. And maybe it's different for the guy with the juggling or the yo-yo versus the guy who writes a love song. But I don't know. I think that's what also rubbed me the wrong way is that.
Yeah, see, I have less of a problem with the preparation. So here's the thing. You want the men in your life to be prepared, right? And if a man came on the show, and the closest I can equate this to is Hell's Kitchen, Gordon Ramsay, big ups to Gordon Ramsay. Love you. Come on our podcast. That's what we should do a podcast on. Can we do a Hell's Kitchen podcast? I love Hell's Kitchen.
I love Hell's
dating
Kitchen
involved.
so
There
much.
better not be any dating involved. The one time there was dating on that show,
that was really bad.
That didn't end very well. No. But it's like, the big thing is he's big on the palate and tasting, right? And so he's got the 2 challenges: taste it, now make it. Where it's like a hidden ingredients, or the blind palate taste test challenge. If you are going to go on Hell's Kitchen, like, it is mandatory that you get the people in your life to drill you on that. If you don't practice that, you are a fool, right? And in some ways, it kind of feels the same way. This is still a competition. You know that you're going to be put into situations, and there is at least a little bit, like you should have at least thought, like, if I have to go to the talent show, like, hey, what would my talent be, right? Like, I don't think I want. I think if a guy is not at least that smart, it doesn't take a lot of planning. If he's not that planful, then what does that say about how he's going to plan a date? How does that say about how he's going to prepare your finances for retirement? What's that say about, how he's going to juggle? Now, I know that they're in their 60s, and so they're not going to have kids, but for somebody in their teens, 20s, 30s, like, how is that going to say about how they're going to navigate the time between family and, and their career, right? Like, you want your men to be planful and prepared. That's not cheating, especially when you know it's coming. And there's also a bit of a prisoner's dilemma for those that are into game theory, right? And prisoner's dilemma, basically, without getting too much into it, it's when you're in a competitive state, like, one of these prisoners is going to talk and catch a deal, right? Now, if nobody talks, then both prisoners make out fantastic. Neither of them go to jail. But if one of them talks, the other's going to jail for a long time. And if they both talk, they both get a shorter prison sentence, but they both go to prison, right? That's the prisoner's dilemma. But this is a game theory, scenario that plays out in all competition. So, like, if you don't prepare, you have to assume somebody else is going to prepare, and they're going to win the time. And the time is the most important commodity that there is on this show, because there's not much of it, right? So, like, the whole thing, like, you just have to assume that you better be prepared for something like this. So I see no ethical or moral dilemma in it.
Okay, I think you convinced me. I mean,
right.
I think you convinced me, but
it's because you want your men to take you on good dates. That's what it is. It was a plan. It was you want your man to be
no. I mean, I think looking at it as a demonstration of other skills or like forethought and all of that stuff makes sense. I can be convinced of that. But that also could be why he was, feeling so frustrated. I mean, they showed his face. His face was like beet red. Is that he did put a lot of time and effort and energy into this. And again, another vulnerability in a sense, because as he tells us on this date, like, he still has such deep love for his wife. And here he is, like, putting himself out there for another woman, and it doesn't work out. Not that he fell on his face, but he didn't, get the date with the girl. So it couldn't have felt good. For Kim. Yeah. So again, I think there is some ego involved, but also whenever we get rejected, which in this way, effectively he was, it doesn't feel good. So I'm going to give Kim a pass, but he's definitely one to watch. Cause as you had pointed out, earlier, that men can read how other men are. You heard the guy say, like, Captain Kim's pretty pissed. Like, they were very aware of the temperature in the room as it related to Kim. Yep,
absolutely. So other than Kim, any other performances or individuals kind of stand out to you that you want to talk about?
I thought Greg's stand-up was good. A way to, as you've pointed out, that people do, like, point fun at himself, talking about his, sleep apnea and things like that. I liked that. I love anytime Pascal's on the screen. So him kind of styling the wig was good. I mean, I thought they were all, like,
I thought Pascal was too on the nose. It's like, hey, if I'm a contractor, let me come in and, like, build a wall or something.
Hey,
it's like,
what else are you going to do?
It's like, hey, I'm going to go trade some bonds. Like at some point, I feel like it's not once you make a career out of it, it's no longer valid for a talent show. Once you are a professional, right? Talents are
hairstyling is an art.
Okay, no. All I'm saying is that once you get paid to do something, no longer valid for a talent show. It's like the Olympics. Once you're a professional athlete, you should not be allowed to participate in the Olympics. Amateurs only. That's how I feel about a talent show. So Pascal, that to me is cheating. So that really just leaves Dan to talk about, who is the winner of the group date. He leans in. You already kind of mentioned him earlier in the episode. He has these hand tremors. It appears to run in the family. Really leans into it. Ends up doing this ribbon dance type of thing. What I liked about a lot of the guys this episode in this particular date is that only one of them did a legitimate comedy routine, but many of them incorporated self-deprecating comedy in their other, from the yo-yoing to the ribbon performances. There was just a lot of this like self-deprecating small amount of humor where it's like, it's not a comedy show, but here's something to laugh at while I'm up here type thing. And I really like that. I think it's a nice way to take the edge off. It's a nice way to get a little vulnerable, and it's a nice way to sort of like ease the crowd into what you're doing. So Dan, I think, nailed that to a T. His ribbon performance was ghastly, but it really wasn't about the ribbon performance because, you had mentioned earlier, you weren't sure how you felt about people over preparing. One of the problems with preparing ahead of time is that Joan came in and said what she was looking for, right? And she said it a lot. The entire theme of this episode was get childish, get adventurous, get fun. And one of the problems with somebody like a Kim who prepares is that he prepared and was committed to something before he got the memo of the theme.
He didn't have the assignment, the directions.
Yep. Yeah. He didn't have the directions, and he completed the exam before he got the actual questions. And so I think that probably hurt a lot of these guys. Then you got Dan over here who grabs a couple of ribbons, leans into probably one of his biggest securities, does one of the most horrific ribbon dances of all time, but it didn't really matter because he demonstrated exactly what Joan was looking for. He understood the assignment. The assignment wasn't the best talented. It was the one who could express themselves, be childish, be fun, and be vulnerable. And on that metric, I think it's hard to say that he did anything less than dominate the competition. Your thoughts?
No, I think so too. I mean, I don't really have much more to add to that. I thought he just like leaned into his tremors, leaned into the like the assignment, so to speak. And this is where we hear him say, like, we've all got issues. That's life. You own it and you deal with it. And like, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, this is part of my life. And we learn later about like what has helped him gain this perspective, but like, he doesn't take himself too seriously. And I think that's also really, really important, in life, but especially at this stage of life.
Okay. So, Dan does get the one-on-one date after the fact. He does not officially get a rose for winning the competition. He gets a dinner, which honestly, better. I think better, right? More one-on-one time. All the other guys go back to the house. We see a little bit of Kim's pouting. Not super happy, pouting a little bit, maybe perhaps. But I thought the one-on-one date, I thought it was kind of comparable to what we've already seen of Joan. Like I said, it's kind of been a bit of a roller coaster in terms of her, how she's engaging with the men. And this, again, kind of felt to me like she was a little bit more too performative and trying to be too perfect. But again, Dan talked a lot about, how he kind of, how he came to be, how he is, how things have affected him, what he's looking for. What I really particularly thought was interesting was when he talked about, his diabetic episodes and how he was at one point told by a medical doctor that he was basically had 6 months to live, and his journey out of that. But what I really thought was interesting when he said, I want to be upfront about these things because it's okay if somebody says to me, that's too much, I don't want to deal with that. Like, no hard feelings. Nice meeting you. We can move on. And this is kind of like my thoughts on this is that we don't do enough of this in life.
I agree.
Right. And yeah, there's so much of this, especially in the younger days, everyone trying to put on, an air, put on a face and pretend
be liked
to be
by
what
everyone.
The other person was. Be liked by everyone, or at least be liked by the person you're on a date with, and pretend to be what they want to be. Try to hide your faults and things that and not being honest with ourselves that there are things about us that are going to turn people off. And that's okay, right? And I just think that we all need to be more self-aware about the fact that, there are going to be things about us or about our situations that will turn people off. And that's not a bad thing. Own those things, right?
Right. Well, that narrows it down. We get that much closer to someone who actually is a good match for us if we can weed out the people that genuinely aren't. I was just listening to a podcast today where there is a behavioral psychologist who does a lot of research about dating. And that was exactly what she was talking about. Like dating apps, like don't just be a cookie cutter version of who you think will attract most people. You don't actually want to attract most people. You want to attract a very specific person because you are a very specific and unique person. So like, it's okay if you get less matches on a dating app. That means that the matches that you do get are higher quality. And so she talked a lot about that, about like, again, turning people off, it gets you closer to your answer, to your outcome, to your desired goal. Let's move on. We've got a, barbecue in lieu of a cocktail party and a rose ceremony.
Yeah. I gotta say, I liked the barbecue idea until I realized it was in lieu of the cocktail party. There's just something about dressing up into a suit and a tie and letting the women get dressed up. And well, I know, but still, but there's something. Me, I'm a formal guy. I like taking you on vacations, and if we go to a location where the dinners we don't get to dress up, I don't want to go on that vacation.
You wear a t-shirt, shorts, and sneakers 350 days of the year. I don't think you're a dress up guy.
What are you talking about? I like to dress up.
Anyway, so they do this barbecue. And what I also liked about this is the significance that Joan drew to it, that it I guess was filmed on a Sunday, and every Sunday she has these big family dinners and these gatherings where she and her loved ones get together. So getting together with all of these guys is meaningful. It's kind of keeping her traditions alive in a way. And I think this is where we do get to see a different side of Joan. We see Joan a little more loose, a little more candid, as we were saying, and we're able to kind of get a little bit more from some of the men too. We hear more from Gary, and they have a nice moment where Joan gives him a photo from prom. We hear more from Kim, and he shares photos that he brought with him about his wife who has passed, also a photo of his granddaughter, and tells a really nice story about that. And then we have this moment with Mark and Joan that we've already seen now from the cold open, but it's their first kiss. And it was a kind of a sweet moment. It seems like, Mark was a little bit shy, like wanting to read the room. And they had a good kiss, if I have to say. But anyway, all of this to say that we got to know some of these men a little bit more. And there's quite a number of widows in this room. And it feels like more widows than we had.
So the one thing about this event, I liked seeing the prep work. I liked, all the guys taking on their different roles. We didn't talk about it earlier, but when Kim was fixing the garbage disposal, just loved that, right?
Awesome.
Can you imagine if the garbage disposal broke in the mansion when it was all the 20-year-old guys? They'd be like, "Oh, who do we call to get that fixed?"
I know.
Jesse,
no, that was cool. That was great.
So, yeah,
I love them doing their very dad things. I thought that was cute. I also loved the opening to this. Mark set us up well. He said, everyone's pitching in, especially with their opinions. And then, and then you just hear there are lots of different opinions about what makes a good burger, about what ingredients should go where. I thought that was really just funny and real. And again, when you get a group of guys together and around a grill, you're gonna have some differences of opinion there.
Yeah, you're gonna get some debate. You're gonna get some emoting, is what I will say, right? Read that room really, really, really strong. And listen, the alpha is the one who's got the spat. He's the one who's flipping the burgers. That's what I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really liked conceptually what was happening here. This is, I would say, for me, this is the most boring part of the episode. And I think part of it was because of what I talked about earlier, where all the guys were doing enough to justify screen time, but nobody other than maybe Jack was doing any buffoonery or causing any drama. And so you got like just a really good distribution across all the guys. You get everybody gets 2 minutes kind of type thing. But there was also like no like underlying theme. There was no real drama. And at this point now we're like an hour and 40 minutes into the episode, hour and a half at least. And
the theme was like, widower. That was the theme.
Yeah. And at this point I was starting to get like just a little burnt out. And I find the barbecue appealing, but I was finding it hard at this point from a pure entertainment perspective. I just needed something to happen to get my attention.
No, I agree. I mean, this is one thing where I felt like this kind of stretched on a little bit long, where I was like, oh God, we're going to spend, I don't know, 20 minutes here. Like, give me more of the talent show. Give me more of the
roll out
dance
the TV
off at the prom.
Episode.
Like, yeah, let's see the rest of the kids talking to their parents. I mean, I feel like there were, if we could have gotten a few more minutes of some other stuff throughout the episode rather, of like the group dates, I would have preferred that to like more of this. But it was good to meet some of the men that we haven't really seen before.
I think we learned a lot more about a lot of the men, again, because it wasn't consumed by the drama.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the most one of the most noteworthy things so far is we're learning so much more about all of the men. One, because what they're sharing is more meaningful, more quickly and more easily, but also such little airtime is going to drama. Right. And so it can go to more meeting the men. And we get we get Jack doing cannonballs, and we get Pascal with the closet. And we didn't talk about the fact that he's paying Greg $100 a load of laundry.
I know. Because he hasn't done laundry in 40 years.
And so, we get funny stuff like that sort of like whets the palate on some of the lighter, aspects of things. But yeah, I thought it was a nice little event. But I don't really think anything meaningful happens here, right?
Sure.
I don't know if you agree, disagree.
No, I'm with you. Except, Mark and Joan had a nice kiss, and Joan gave Gary the frame. So I think those were two like meaningful to Joan's journey moments. But then we get a rose ceremony. They do all change. They do get into their formal attire. And we have a rose ceremony where we keep 3, 6,
14.
9.
We're at 18. We lost.
Got rid of 4. Yeah.
And I was nervous going into this. Jack just wasn't really enough. A mainstay. He didn't do enough. It definitely you didn't get the feeling like he was really putting in the effort with Joan. He was sort of just kind of like just being a clown and comedic relief. And so I was doing the math out, and I thought, like, there's 6 guys that are on the chopping block. Is it possible that they could keep him? But
they don't need him when they've got Pascal,
I don't know. They're different energies, and but hey, listen, at the end of the day, we had 3 safe people, right? And that's Jonathan, Chalk, and Dan, the 3 dates. And so let's just go through the roses very quickly. Mark, Gary, Pascal, Jordan, CK, Keith, Gil, Charles L. or Wise Charles, Kim, Greg, and Guy. And there's no shock here. The 4 eliminated were 4 of the 6 I had on the likely list. And that's Bob, Jack, Michael, and Christopher. So sad to see Jack go. I didn't think Bob had legs. I didn't think Michael had legs. And I didn't think Christopher had legs. So, I think, of the remaining 14, there's not a lot of dead
fat
wood
to
left.
cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get to Rose and Thorn, any last thoughts of the episode?
No, I mean, I thought it was a fun, wholesome episode. I thought we learned a bunch about all of the guys. I don't think any of the eliminations were particularly shocking. I don't think any of the roses were particularly shocking. I'm sad to see Jack go, but outside of that, I don't really.
No, I mean, I get how this must be a hard position for Joan to be in. They all are they seem really great. So
I think starting next episode, it's going to be very hard to predict up front who's going home.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I agree. I guess we will see.
Yeah.
So let's get into Rose and Thorn. What do you got this week?
I'm happy you asked about my Rose this week.
Love it.
My Thorn this week.
I hated to see that.
So obviously, we already know a Thorn, maybe not my true Thorn, but come on, production. You couldn't keep Jack around one more week for me? Just for me? You know,
the
do me this
sock puppets,
solid.
man, the cannonballs.
The sock puppets.
He just was not. He was not here for Joan.
This was not a strong week for him. I mean, the sock puppets, I thought he could have pulled something else out. Like at that point, it just felt like he was just doing the most absurd thing he could think of. And it was like, come on, what are we doing here? Still, I enjoyed him while he lasted. But I'm sad to see him go. But I'm also, Thorn, he went home. Sub Thorn, his sock puppet show. But I'm going to give a rose petal to his cannonballs. I really, really was growing concerned when they let up that last one that he was going to like injure himself on that last one. But no, there he is, 60 whatever years old, and just cannonballing away.
Yeah,
yeah,
good
cannonballing away. I want to do a quick another rose petal to Wise Charles, right? When he like low key subtle, insults the rest of the group and no one even notices. He's like, I'm the oldest one here, but I guess I'm also the healthiest one, so I'm going up to the top bunks, right?
That's funny. He's also not the oldest, but yeah,
he's up there. He's got to be in the top, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to another Thorn. I got them all over the place. I'm not even doing them in order this week. Wait, bunk beds still? We still have bunk beds? Did we learn nothing?
They have to, though. That's
They're
part
60
of the
years old.
experience. They're probably in better shape than both of us, some of them. My God.
I mean, some of them look impeccable. Even Jack was in good shape for his age, right?
Jack?
Yeah, he was the only one we really saw with just swim trunks on. And even I'm saying for his age, he's jumping around doing cannonballs, and it wasn't like he was sloppy.
I mean, he's spry, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's in good shape.
For his age, he did not look that bad. That's all I'm saying, right? But yeah, so that's sort of my there's no big. This is an episode where I really struggled to find a definitive thing that I loved and a definitive thing that I hated in the episode. There was just I just generally enjoyed the episode, and there were just little things here that I was like, wasn't great, but I didn't feel like anything was really truly full on Rose or full on Thorn worthy. So I'm just gonna spray you with a bunch of rose petals and small little thorns. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have a thorn that comes to mind. I have I don't know what the equivalent of a rose petal is. My thorn petal is the color of Joan's dress during the rose ceremony, not only because I feel like it is just so ripe to be memed in some way because it creates the effect of a green screen. And so I'm just waiting to see what people are going to kind of project onto her with her green screen dress. If people are on the internet enough, Kate Middleton wore a similar color, I don't know, a few months ago or a year ago or so. And the internet had a lot of fun with that. So I don't know, maybe it will turn out to be something fun and funny that the meme accounts will do something with. But I just thought oof, that wasn't the best color choice, just given the internet, but maybe that's a point. As far as
the cape was a little over the top. I didn't get the cape component.
I don't know what time of year it is that they're filming. It could be really cold, and if that's the case, I think that's again a cool look. For I mean, it's better than the fur wrap,
Yeah.
So, but as far as a rose, I don't think I had so many things that I loved about this episode that I don't feel like I could give one. I loved seeing the dynamics in the house. I loved Pascal's commentary about doing laundry, that he pays someone $100 a load to do them, that he refers to himself as high maintenance. I loved that. I loved learning more about Charles L. and seeing again how endearing he is. I loved the overall sentiment of these men and their wisdom and their perspective on life. I don't know. I love this show. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that it's here. So I mean, maybe I have a cop out here of not really having a specific rose to give. But I just felt like all of it was great.
So you're really giving your rose indirectly to casting and production.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, this was a really entertaining episode. So I loved it. I thought the dates were good. I mean, it was just solid all around. So I'm a fan. I'm in.
All right. And with that, shall we get out of here?
Yes, please. It is 12:30 in the morning. For those of you who have made it this far. But we're here. We will be back next week with episode 3 of The Golden Bachelorette. Thank you for tuning in, for following along, for giving that thumbs up, for all of your comments, for subscribing. Thank you. We love you. We appreciate you. Keep it coming. You can also follow us on Instagram at Reactivity TV. You can follow me at Amy Albero, LCSW. You can send us emails with any feedback, suggestions to reactivitystv@wishingyouwell.com. And we will be back next week with more. Have a great week. We'll see you later.
See ya.
Bye.